Hi. Unit 1 discusses our overarching description and definition of what we mean when we say user experience and how it applies to the Allegis group and more specifically the Connected project. One of the points that I want to drive home as a takeaway for you in all this is that, number one, the responsibility for doing research is not just with a user experience researcher or someone whose role is dedicated for research. It's important that all of us are involved in observing end users. It's important that all of us really understand the needs, the pain points, so that we can more successfully deliver things that will be worthwhile and valuable to our customers. And in turn, it'll make us more successful in the work that we do, because it will mean less rework, that we can achieve greater success by really understanding and observing our users with the system. I want to define what we mean when we talk about user experience. For many, it's just simply what looks good, the colors, things like that. But it's much more than that. And sometimes it's hard to even measure. Nowadays, when we're dealing with technology and software, why people choose one piece of software over another doesn't always have to do anymore with the technology that underpins it. It may not even have to do with the features, although that's the focus for a lot of people. If their software can do one thing that another one cannot, that may be the differentiator. But many times nowadays, there's equivalent products that can do a similar thing, and so it's really the experience that is the differentiator, and that's how we're focusing our efforts within this connected space, that we feel that we really have an opportunity to innovate here and to do something that's never been done, and so we want it to be an excellent experience for all people, whether they're internal staff or external talent and clients. But what do we mean when we say experience? Peter Morville takes a good stab at defining that. He has an article that he talks about the user experience honeycomb. What he defines is the things that together make up a positive experience. So certainly it has to be useful. So from a requirements perspective, we need to make sure that it's a definite need. Desirable gets more to the feeling. One of the things that I'll say is that for people that maybe have to use a system all day, every day, if we think of recruiters and all, we want it to be something that's engaging to them, that they will enjoy using. Certainly accessible, not only from a 508 perspective, but I could sometimes say accessible as being able to locate the information that you need. It needs to be credible, trustworthy. Valuable, obviously it needs to add value. Findable, we need to be able to, as end users, find those things and be successful. And then of course usable, which would be more of kind of the traditional things that we think of with user experience. Usability testing: can people accomplish tasks that are what we built the product for? The other thing I want to frame too is that the user experience is beyond just our own little piece of the pie. So many of us are focused on one product stream or one feature set, and certainly we want to care about the experience for that, but it's much broader. Really, when we're talking about the experience, we need to be thinking about not only what part we play, but how what we're developing interacts with everything else in the ecosystem that is this whole experience of finding great jobs for folks. So when we think of the different operating companies, hiring managers, job seekers, recruiters, all these people influence our end users and provide an experience to them. It's not just using a piece of software, but we need to be mindful that we want the entire experience to be something that is excellent for all end users. So I want to talk a little bit about what we mean from a development life cycle perspective. There's different methodologies for how to approach software development. Certainly Connected is following an agile methodology, which is taking little chunks of work, producing something, having a feedback loop, making changes based on that feedback, and then iterating some more. When we talk about it from a design perspective, and this is very stereotypical and subject to change, but generally we think of from a design process, when we have a high level understanding of what it is that we need to build, that beginning part is really kind of blue skying, coming up with a lot of different design ideas and getting some end user feedback. Sometimes what this does is inform specifications or user stories, and vice versa. This is when those user stories are created. At that point, there could be wireframes and designs that are influenced from the research that has been done to date, and that informs the user story narrative. Developers create that feature set. There may then be what we call a design audit, so making sure that the ideas with respect to designing the feature now play out so that the product that was developed includes those things that are critical for the experience. And then one aspect of the feedback loop, in addition to some standard software development methods of testing and user acceptance testing, it's getting end user validation less from a bug perspective, but more from can they be successful and accomplish tasks. So we may run usability tests around feature sets or observe people using the feature. Now, one of the fantastic things about working at Allegis on the connected product set of products is that they have a great way of organizing the work. And they do that by having subject matter experts be what they call product owners. So these are folks that have a lot of experience in the business and are representing certain people types who would be the target end users. What's fantastic about their involvement is that they are the kind of the final authority and make decisions about that product. And they focus on what needs to be built. The risk, however, is that what they'll do is lean on what we call experience owners, folks who again represent the business, represent different operating companies, represent different end user types. The risk that I mentioned is that, again, they're fantastic at providing information about what to build, but sometimes these folks are removed from the day-to-day. Like, they may not be the target end users, so I call them proxies. They're not always a proxy, but some of them are. And we have to kind of keep that in mind when we're doing this research, that we can get a lot of good stuff. But one of the other risks, too, is that when working with a group, you can get groupthink, meaning someone who has the loudest voice could then influence the design. So again, this has its place, but the focus needs to be on what should be built. In contrast, in design research, the focus is less about what do we need to build, and it's more about how do we build it. How do we build it so people can be successful? How can we build it so they're delighted that the product is intuitive? So a lot of the design research that we're doing is understanding first, how do people do their work now, and thinking about how they can be more successful in the future. And so when we do designs, we want to get end user validation, going to the people that would be using the product, asking them to accomplish typical tasks, and understanding, was it easy for them? Was it frustrating? Exactly, what could be missing, so that we can go back to the business and go back to the product teams and potentially make changes. In contrast, we're working with individuals here, and the idea is that if we were to talk to 10 people or to run a usability test with 10 people, they have their own worldview, their own perspective on things, and so one person may be able to accomplish all these tasks very easy and quickly. For someone else, it might be more challenging. So we want to make sure that we get the representative end users who are the target people that we're building for, to make sure that everyone can be successful using the product. Now, there's different ways to get validation. Certainly, from a numbers perspective, there's ways that you can look at a lot of people at once. So if we think about traditional web analytics, it's looking at the behavior of many people. However, when it comes to usability testing, and that can be done in a large, unmoderated fashion, but we find that even having one-on-one time with like 5 to 8 users can uncover most of the problems that would keep people from being successful. Now, who are we talking about here? Well, when we say testing 5 to 8 people, that would be folks from kind of a similar demographic. For the project that we're working on, there's different roles, so recruiter, job seeker, hiring manager, etc. There could be different industries, and those industries may function in slightly different ways. The business model for recruiting and staffing could be different, so whether you're hiring one person, or maybe you're hiring a whole bunch of people to fill out an organization's department, or you may be doing direct placement, permanent placement. And then we have to be mindful of the type of users as well. Are these folks who are novice, who aren't maybe technically savvy, or perhaps folks that really are? So we need to keep that in mind as we think about who are the representative end users and how many people do we need to get validation from. Again, the point I want to drive home, though, is that research is not the responsibility of a single person whose job title is researcher. We don't, in an agile fashion, we don't want someone to come up with a shiny 10-page report and give metrics to people to enact. Instead, we want this to be a collaborative practice where everybody on the product team is really in touch with the end user. So the encouragement that I have for everyone is, whatever your role is, make sure that you're watching end users, because you're gonna. It's like communication. If I have a 2-minute conversation face-to-face with someone, I can get so much more accomplished than if we're playing email for a week. So very much the same way. Don't sit there in your cubicle. Don't sit there in your office. Go out to where people are doing these jobs right now so that you can understand what the need is. And the key there is to observe.